And so thank you guys for joining us for this episode of The Bridge with Cory and John. And of course, I'm Cory George. And joining me, as always, is my brother in crime, uh, John Hazelwoods. And so, again, we thank you guys so much for joining us for the last episode because it got a little bit heavier and deeper and with more information in terms of John's experience with childhood assault. How do you feel having said all of that? Because that was more than what you revealed the first time. And again, it was all unexpected. We weren't going there, but since we opened the door, we had to close the door. So, how are you feeling right now after having come through all of that information that you unloaded?
As the days have gone on, you go through emotions. I've allowed myself to sit through each and every last one of those emotions, and I feel great. It's like I close the door and I open the window, and I'm able just to breathe in a refreshing, calm, sense of just relief. Um, and I feel really good. I feel good. I feel that the message was delivered the way in which it was needed to be, and hopefully that it's received by our audience, and that those words, by us being transparent like that, it is honestly the key to having someone else take the initiative to take that stand and to stand up for themselves and come forward.
Well, one statement you had said that I didn't talk about because I forgot was you mentioned the phrase "peeling back the onion," and I always use that phrase when I'm talking about
Mhm.
the first time coming clean with anything that we fear would cause us judgment, more guilt, more shame. Is like that onion. In order to get to the sweet part, we have to go through the little painful part, and it doesn't last that long. But
Mhm.
every time you tell your story, when it matters most, that onion will get sweeter and it'll be less difficult for you to manage. And then that's when you realize that your story is not a pain for you anymore. It's a
Mhm.
purpose for someone else. So I'm proud of you for even feeling comfortable and safe enough to come forward with something that no one asked you to. And as always, there's always going to be someone or people who may not understand why you chose this method to share your truth. And sometimes we can't care about that, but I know that for every person that may for some reason denounce what you've done, about 100 more will either do it in their own space or to you directly and applaud you for that. So I thank you for that, and especially for the sake of Black men's mental health. And so in this episode, which ties along with Black men's with Black men's mental health, we're talking about Black men and suicide. I made a post on Instagram, I think yesterday, and I want to pull it up. And it says, because I don't know the quotes right off the top of my head, but it says African American men ages 20 to 24 have the highest suicide rate among African Americans of all ages, male and female. And suicide is the third leading cause of death for African American males ages 15 to 24. And just those two statements alone makes this subject very important. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it a from a standpoint of therapy with our special guest, Mr. Nick Dillon, as well as talk about ways that we can intervene, not just as therapists or people in the helping field, but also friends, family, and support systems, and how we can stand in the gap, and also how we can tell the warning signs and what we do when we think someone is thinking of suicide. And so Nicholas Dillon is a life coach, counselor, and leadership consultant. And the Milwaukee native possesses a Bachelor's of Art in Communications and a Master's in Adult Education. He also holds a Master's of Science in Counseling and also has completed postgraduate work in behavioral psychology. His career has placed him in front of business professionals all over the world, including appearances on national TV, and he's also a best-selling author. And so joining us now is Mr. Nick Dillon. Hey there, Nick. How's it going?
Hey, how are you all?
Good
We
evening.
are
Good evening.
we are great. And if you have not heard of Mr. Hazelwood, this is John Hazelwood, my co-host.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Very nice as well. It's a pleasure, and I'm glad that you've taken the opportunity to join us tonight on this segment, which I believe is going to be very beneficial for our community, especially within Black men.
And I think those of us who are in the helping field, we're always prepared for change because we have to help our clients to also prepare for change. And so my question is for you having to do the telehealth piece for clients who are usually used to coming into your office, being used to your face and having that connection. Has that been some sort of transition that you've had to help them with as well?
Yes, yes. That's a big adjustment for a lot of clients because I do a lot of addiction work.
Okay. Okay.
And so, and part of that means when you're meeting with clients face to face, you are, while you're engaging them, you're really tuning into the nonverbal part of them,
Absolutely.
because you're looking for signs of maybe relapse, and signs of other, other areas that would suggest that there might be some other things wrong. So while you can get some things from telehealth and kind of virtually like this, um, it takes a little bit of that out of it. I run a holistic clinic, and so part of that holistic approach is embracing with a hug.
Yeah.
Clients,
Yeah.
clients leaving with a hug, and I see mostly men. So it's they don't get that, and so it's a big, huge adjustment to not to be able to get that. And I recognize that even in some cases, a lot of clients, that being able to leave wherever they are to come into an environment, and get support and help, I recognize in that capacity that you're their biggest resource and you are their level of support and advocacy for that matter. And so
Hmm.
when they leave you, they're going back out into a world or a home or whatever that looks like, and it could be challenging. And so to say, yes, we can still connect, but I'm going to need you to connect from your home or from a different safe place virtually, sometimes can be challenging.
Well, and it's interesting you said hug because one day I realized it was recently, probably 2 weeks ago. I said, I don't miss being out, but I miss a hug. I hug my family all day, but we inadvertently hug our friends, if we haven't seen them in a while. We hug well, for some of us, we hug the coworker because, we're close. But then I
Right.
realized that's the part I'm missing. And also wearing the mask bothers me because I can't see your face.
Right. Right.
I'm a smiler. I'm a body
Right.
language person. So if I'm being nice to you in the store, I hope you hear the tone, but because you can't see my face. And
Right.
everybody just looks like an android and all you see are the eyes and up. And so it's like you can't that whole thing of filling things out has been taken away
Right.
because you don't know what's under the mask. It may be a frown, it may be a smile, it may be a blank stare or like a face of fear. So
Right.
for me, that's the engagement I miss is because I'm a body language person. And you made a great point is that when you're treating something in a holistic way, it means the whole body.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're only seeing someone from the neck up, that's all you're going to get.
You know,
Right.
Yeah.
and to add on to that, I've noticed especially too, like a lot of my friends and I, what we'll do is we'll do bi-weekly meetings just to check up on one another. And sometimes it's maybe 20 to 30 of us black males that are educated, that are located across the country. A lot of us have come to the realization that we miss physical interaction with one another, the value of a hug, the value of just that handshake. I don't want to
Mhm.
embrace you by a handshake no more and just a smile. I want to embrace you because it's like an exchange of like positivity and energy and you feel it that's there. So when we're isolated at home, I think, a lot of us haven't really taken the time to think about the effects that it can have when it's taken away from you.
Well, yeah, well, and that's going to be something that we're going to lean into when we start to have the dialogue about black men and suicide. But but for you, Nick, I want to talk to you because not only do you have you probably dealt with these cases, but the most interesting thing about it is that, and we'll talk about this first, but it's true that no matter your education level, no matter your social economic level, all of us may may come into the space of thinking of suicide. But from you, but I want to ask you, with your experience, what are some of the warning signs that you've experienced working with your clients? And and to also talk with the audience because we can see those warning signs even as a support system. So what are those warnings? So the most basic warning signs that we can see with someone in our home that's sitting next to us.
Right. Right. Very, very good question, Corey. The big thing that I tell, support system, extended families, spouses, partners, significant others is is pay attention to language, pay attention to isolation when people just find themselves wanting to be by themselves, where maybe the family is gathered here and it's kind of a relaxing moment in the living room, but they want to be isolated. And when you go back in the room, maybe they're sleeping and they already slept 8 hours last night,
Right.
or they're not playing a video game or anything like that. They're just kind of laying there. Sometimes they could just be sitting and staring in space. Um, and pay attention to demeanor. There used to be changes in personality. So there used to be really happy-go-lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're really jovial. They're very conversational. We've got to pay attention to the character of the person that they think we don't know, but we do when we're close to them.
Right.
And I think oftentimes we miss some of the simple things like, they got on the same shirt that they had on all week. Their hygiene is different. They need to shave, but they're not shaving. When people start to let go of some of the basic needs that we normally care about, paying attention to that. And I think oftentimes we don't approach because we feel we might be insulting, we might be hurting their feelings, we might think, but you just have to ask the questions out of concern. Is everything okay? Are you good? Whenever someone gets to that place of, we call it unmanageability.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're thinking about suicide, there's two tracks here, is that people can have thoughts of suicide. And some people, your average individual probably has had maybe a thought of not living, or a thought of, because of a situation or circumstance that they might be in, but it doesn't get very real until besides the thought, someone is actually spelling out to you a plan.
Right.
When someone can articulate the plan out of what that looks like, we are really in crisis mode. Okay. And where they start acting on it, or they, if on that call, the gentleman was perhaps telling you that he had already bought the pills and the pills were there,
Mm-hmm.
that's serious crisis.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
most folks in that level of crisis that we call unmanageability is their cry for help. So indirectly, a lot of people put the subtleties out there in hopes that family members, partners, people out that nature will see and at least act on it. Even if it's, hey, I think something's going on, we need to talk, because they really want to be talked off the ledge, but they don't want to come out and say it because they get in such a depressive slump that, when you get into that space of no one cares,
Yeah.
you don't care, you don't love yourself, and nothing else matters, and the sky is falling, and you can't see nothing in your immediate future that would suggest that today is going to look and feel differently. That's crisis mode. They're right there. And a lot of times people get there by themselves in isolation, and that's where you see a lot of it's carried out, because they're not around people.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone's going to plan and do it, in a lot of cases they're found, or they might say something and we just can't get to them in time. They've thought about this for a little while, and it's at that point, it's at that level, and they're at that space now where it doesn't matter. We're at the point of no return. And so to be able to get there sooner, I think as siblings, as loved ones, as friends and partners, and even associates, we've got to recognize what the warning signs are. And some of them are basic things, just like you're not your happy self.
But I also want to add just a couple of more things that I've noticed, especially with the clients I've worked with, is that when I'm talking with them and I ask, well, have you thought about, tomorrow? Sometimes a suicidal person has not even seen as far as next week because they didn't plan to be here next week. So that's a sign too. If you're in conversation and there's no outlook in the conversation, also when the person starts to give you their most prized possessions, if they start to just give things away, and I'm like, no, this is your favorite thing, it's okay, you can have it. That's a warning sign because it's unusual. And I want to ask you really quick, because I thought about it just now, and then John has a question. how how ineffective are the barriers and stigmas that the Black community holds towards mental health care? How does that act as an obstacle for when we recognize these signs? Because if I don't believe in mental health care and I don't believe in going to a therapist, I may not be as quick to report something.
Right. Great question. Again, the challenge that we have is that um, most of the systems that we deal with, from healthcare to mental health to the educational systems, um, are we're, as a people of color, and especially men of color, it's a it's seen as a system of non-trust. And so, since we have so much history of that,
Yes.
and moving into that, those arena, the mental health system is no different.
Right.
And so, and the unique thing about that too is that even from a cultural standpoint, when you're talking about mental health and stability, you got two things that are there. As men, we're socialized into the only real emotion to share is anger. And
Yes.
so to be able to say that I have this emotion, that emotion may be fear, that emotion may be, you know, um, anything that will potentially make us look weak, means that it takes away from us being a man. And so, and to be able to share that openly, again, is a sign of weakness. And so when you grow up in a culture also that doesn't trust the system, because, I'll just use myself as an example, where mama said, what happens here stays here. Don't tell nobody. Don't say nobody. Don't, everything is just here. If you got something that's going on, it always stays here and it doesn't leave
Absolutely.
outside the home. So when you have that embedded as a mental mindset, then then what happens is, as men, we stuff it, and we find various reasons to stuff it, whether it's sex, whether it's drinking, whether it's smoking, whether it's drugs, whether it's whatever we can
Yeah.
find that helps us to anesthetize in the moment.
Hmm.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
And we do it until it's not working for us and not working for us and not working for us. And when it's not working for us, then we find one of those fixes again to make it work. And it becomes a perpetual cycle that happens and happens and happens until you finally say to yourself, or someone is able to convince you that mental health is real, it's a challenge for you, and it's a good thing to get some help because you can have a better lifestyle. And I think there's a big stigma on even mental health. You can have a mental health challenge and live a very normal life.
Amen.
Absolutely.
With therapy and even with, some of the prescribed meds, it doesn't mean you don't get to live a regular life. You can have a mental health condition, be on meds, or even in therapy and live a normal life. We just got to dispel all the myths around it.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right with that, especially me being a Black man with ADHD. Unless I tell you
Same here.
that, there we go, right there. That's boom, squirrel moment. So, you mentioned something very, very important, which is the importance of communication. So you talk about how we can be a support system, whether we have a friend, whether it's family, whether it's a coworker, someone that you're affiliated with, they're concerned about you. One of the biggest things that I see is that people don't necessarily know how to address someone who is possibly going through the idea of suicide, having those suicidal thoughts. And I remember I read a meme not too long ago, and it was talking about the 21 top phrases that you should never say to someone who's dealing with that there. So what I want to know is, can you name some of those phrases that you would suggest that people not say to someone who is maybe, contemplating suicide, or, they're heavy into depression? What are some things you think that we shouldn't say to them?
I don't know what the article said, but I'm just going to think of something that's from what I've heard in the past. Probably one of them that you shouldn't say is, "What are you going to do that for?"
Okay.
Something to the effect of, "Why would you do that?" Something to the effect of, I've heard one where someone said that, "No, you're not,"
Hmm.
or even start asking questions like, or that's weak. And I've
Mm.
heard people say things like, if you commit suicide, you're going to go to hell.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say.
I've heard that, and just things around anything that you can do. Another one is, I don't believe you.
Nice.
Okay.
I've heard that too, because all of those type of statements reinforces the belief of doing it. And so any of those probably 21 statements that you've heard, that you've read, and they'll probably vary depending on the individual, are all things that can potentially be the tipping point of decision making.
Okay, yeah. As a matter of fact, I wanted to actually read some to both of you and see what your comments would be on it. One is just snap out of it, get over yourself. You need to get out a little bit more. It's all in your mind. You're always so negative now. It's your own fault. No one said life was ever fair. That is one in particular that I have a relation with, especially, going through my teenage years where, when you're not taught how to regulate your emotions and how to truly sit with them, everyone's saying life isn't fair. Well, tell me, if I go through that, how can I process it? What can I do to get out of that negative way of thinking? And then one more is stop looking for attention.
Well, so funny thing about those statements, almost all of those statements are things that you've already thought about as a suicidal person.
Mhm.
So you've thought you were crazy. You thought it was in your head. And you already think life is unfair. If you thought life was fair, then you wouldn't, then you probably wouldn't be suicidal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all that I heard were them, as you said, affirming the ideas of why a person would do that. So it's almost like pushing you over the edge or handing you the knife, saying, "Go ahead. I gave you all the reasons that you thought about already." But now let's talk about what we can do. Let's talk about what we can do. So for example, even if you're not a trained professional, John, you can stand in support of a friend. Um, the one of the things that I tell my friends all the time is that if you hear those things, um, ask questions that gives you answers as to what the motivation is.
Okay.
Because it is true that some people do certain things to seek attention. But let's find out what the motivation is. Why do you want to kill yourself? Is it over a girlfriend? Is it over job loss? Is it over the anxiety over the pandemic because you're stuck in a house? Let's find out what those reasons are first, and then from that point, then we have to decide um, how serious are they. And as Nick said, ask them if they have a plan. If they've planned it out thoroughly and they have the means, then there's a crisis happening. And then that's when we should try to involve people who are specialized to help them in that way, because the person I was talking to last night was referred by someone, and the person who referred them texted me from their phone because he couldn't. Then I called. So that's how he stood in for him. It's like, you're so stuck in this idea, I have to do that for you. So sometimes you may have to be the one to call the hotline. Sometimes you may have to take a cell phone and call someone for him but to get the crisis underway. So I'll let Nick speak on what he feels.
And it's not a bad thing to call the police and have them do a wellness check.
Mm-hmm.
They can be mad all they want. I really don't care.
Right.
Because you care about them that much. And if they're good, they're good. So wellness check. And then I think if you suspect, it's good to encourage them not to be by themselves. So this could be a thing. Hey, I've done some things in the past where I've maybe went a weekend with a friend somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
or just to kind of get them to snap out of it a little bit and see things a little differently, and just kind of, it gives you an opportunity to get in their head a little bit more. Be willing to have a deeper conversation underneath the iceberg, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
Move past the everyday nice to-dos and be willing to be real serious and go as deep as you need to, just to help uncover some beliefs and thinking. Because if you can pivot the thinking and belief system in the moment of thoughts of suicide, you can change the trajectory of their life. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
if you can shift their thinking and you can get them into a different space of thinking, you challenge the mind and you tap into that part of the brain that makes them see things differently. I love how you all brought up when you brought up the examples of what not to say, and even the suggestion of what that could potentially look like in crisis. One of the unique things that we need to be able to pull a person out of is they are not alone. And one of the biggest things that I have been able to do that in some cases impacted someone was to who was going through a suicidal moment was to tell them that I too was them at some point in my own life. And I too went down that road. And I too felt all of those things that they felt. But at some point along this journey, I pivoted. I decided that no, this is not where I want to be. I want better for me. And I spent the last however many years working on just loving me. And when you get to a point of loving yourself to an extreme, I'm talking to an extreme that nothing that comes into your life can't pivot that,
Right.
then suicidal thoughts and even planning comes off the table.
Well, so you mentioned something well, no, you mentioned this asset of making sure that people felt heard and not alone. So one thing that I almost always do, and especially if I know you personally, the first thing I do is I restate what you say so I can make sure that you know that I heard you. That I'm not just waiting just to answer you, but I'm saying, okay, this is what you said. Okay, making sure that you know that I heard you. And then when you said challenging, what I do is if you give me a negative thought that I can reframe into a positive way of thinking, that's the first thing I do. It's like you see this way, but let me give you proof based on what I know that you've achieved in your life so far,
Absolutely.
based on the strength that I've
Absolutely.
seen in the past. This is what this could look like now. How do we tap into the strength that you've used in the past, to overcome this situation? If it's about a girlfriend, it's like, okay, what about the relationship hurt the most? Is it losing her or is it making you feel insecure? What does that loss mean to you? Because sometimes they don't have the words. So the thing is, if you give a person the power to have the words, sometimes that's all they need is to talk it out because sometimes we're stuffed in our feelings because we don't have the words
Right.
and
Right.
everything gets jumbled. So it hurts more because we know we're hurting, but how can I tell you if I don't know what that is? And you said it perfectly as men, we're not always taught the language of emotions.
Mhm.
So sometimes I'm fearful, but I don't know that that's what I'm feeling. I don't know what anxiety is. Yes, I'm anxious all the time, but I don't know that that's what that is. But now that I put a name to it, wow, okay, now I can go tell somebody maybe I'm not as suicidal as I thought because I have an outlet. I have language. I have I have some type of assurance that someone hears me. And you said something interesting about taking a weekend and being with that friend. There are times where I would stay on the phone until that person goes to sleep. Um, and because I'm trained on what to do, sometimes I tell them, make me a promise, at least until tomorrow. Whatever you thought about doing, can we hold off until tomorrow? I will call you in the morning, but can we make a contract? Can we make a personal promise that use that we put aside that plan and a promise that if you feel yourself sliding to think about it during the night, call me. And so just
Yeah.
to give them that assurance that they have an emergency contact says, oh, and it happened actually this morning. I got a text at 4:43 this morning. So because the person was like, thank you for talking to me, I just fell asleep. And I was like, okay, I'm here. So when we make promises that people can trust, because sometimes they don't feel they have anybody they can trust. So
Absolutely.
if we help to create even those temporary trust relationships, that's going to go a long way because we just want to see you out of crisis. Then if you need some type of help that's more prolonged, then we could talk about that the next day.
Right. I think a very vital thing that I think is, and we've touched on it a little bit, and I just want to really bring it up close and personal for each and every one of us, especially men that might be tuning in and listening to this, is that while we're not socialized into being emotion
Mhm.
and being emotional is in times of crisis, in times of stress, in times of heartbreak, whatever that looks like for us. It's okay to feel.
Mhm.
It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel mad. It's okay to feel happy. It's okay to feel all the feelings and allow yourself to feel. And if in those moments we can take some time and just allow ourselves to feel, if I have to weep and cry, it's okay to weep and cry. Allow yourselves to feel and know that through your own love and belief in yourself that it doesn't take anything away from who you know you are.
Mhm.
And whether that's with a friend, whether that's by yourself, whether that's with a partner, whatever that needs to look like, because you need the release. And if I don't have the outlet to feel, then I'm always going to turn to something else. I'm always going to be looking for the next vice, the next thing that I can do to anesthetize what that looks like for me. And that's only temporary. And what that does is it builds, it builds, it builds. And we stack and stack and stack. And then when the crisis happens, that's pivotal. We combine them all up and we have no outlet. Why?
Mhm.
Because we're not allowing ourselves to feel, release.
Yeah.
It's okay. Talk about it. You know, it doesn't take anything away from who we are. And it allows us to do some, I call, if you don't, I say to class, if you don't want to come to therapy, do some self-therapy. Self-therapy is feeling, allowing yourself to feel the emotion. If I'm angry and I'm upset, let me feel that. If I'm hurt and I'm going to cry because I done broke up with my partner, okay, let me feel that. It's okay. The challenge happens when the emotion becomes so strong and we've not allowed ourselves the outlet that it becomes unmanageable.
Mhm.
And we're looking for the first thing to do to put the band-aid on,
Mm.
but it still sits there.
Yep.
And you know what? I actually want to touch bases on that. You made me think of something. I'm an avid listener to music. Music is very instrumental to everyone's life every single day because music, it's a way to express yourself.
Mhm.
And I feel that now, especially the younger generation and a lot of these artists, they talk about their stresses through music. I mean, they've been doing it for years. I mean, you go back to Biggie and Tupac and Nas that talked about their upbringing, but then you see more. There's a shift about self-medicating. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because of the fact you had that recent artist Juice World that was really popular amongst kids. A lot of like teens, I even know kids, in middle school listening to him. And he's talking about self-medicating and he died of an overdose because he didn't have an escape. So my question is to both of you,
Mhm.
what do you think self-medication, why is self-medication always a method, self-medication, whether it be like alcohol use or the consumption of drugs, why is that such a popular go-to, especially in the Black community with our males who are artists and they're promoting that?
Well, so you and I talked about this before we started, and I'm an older guy, so I know that back in the day in the music industry, they had what was called an A&R department. So
Yes.
sometimes these artists were developed for at least a couple of years. There are multi artists that we thought were out when you heard the first song, but they were being nurtured for years before that. They were being
Dillon,
trained.
sir.
They had managers, and I think right now, what we're dealing with is a lot of artists who, because the industry looks different, so you can be an independent artist and have a hit without a team behind you that's making sure you're safe. You could have a team behind you that's getting paid, so they're not going to stop you from self-medicating if that means that they're not going to eat, if that means you're going to fire them, if that means that so I think that right now I think artists may be missing that care team because the industry looks different, and there are a lot of artists who are disposable, or those who gain money. Are we having people in their ear helping them manage their money, helping them manage the stress of fame, and asking them, why do you want to be famous? Some people just want to be famous just to feel good, not to do anything with it, but for them, it's a step up from where they started. And so that's my opinion. I just think that the way that the industry treats artists now, and we idolize some people that we question. Like I question them all the time. I'm like,
Mhm.
why are we idolizing that person, but not this person over here?
Right.
So that's my 2 cents about it.
It's interesting. I'm gonna go down two different tracks for you, um, and I think I might be a little older than Cory. So
Just a little, just a
Hey, music is music. Hey, I still listen to David Ruffin, like one of my favorite Temptations
okay,
of all time. So
so
I got
the industry back then and now, at the end of the day, I think every artist needs to realize, and I'm unfortunately, if you're an artist, I hate to bring this to you, but and you're listening, is that the the labels and the industry only cares about what you put out.
it's a
They
business.
don't care about you. It's a business.
Hmm.
And so whatever you need to do to put an album out, to put a single out, to get a song out, that's all they care about. And so, if as artists, both then and now, you need to surround yourself with people who care about the wellness of you in the industry.
Hmm.
And that's your job as an artist. I think what happens is we get drawn into the hoopla and the lights and the glitz and the glamour and all what that looks like. And we forget the fact that I got to take care of me. I got to be well and I got to be whole. And to your point earlier, is that I think a big challenge to this is, and it's changed drastically. I did it. I intentionally did it with my kids because, and my kids are in their 20s and 30s. Is I did it with my kids because of what I went through, but we're not teaching them coping skills. And
Right.
so when you don't teach coping skills, then they're gonna find a way, whatever works. And
Yeah.
the society will teach them what coping, and coping right now in society for a lot of teens is self-medicating. And so if we don't teach them how to cope, if we don't teach them, how to deal with life and stress and things of that nature, and how you need to feel things, and it's okay if you don't win and you don't get this, and you might have to wait for that. They're growing up in a society where everything is here. They get everything right now today. They don't have to wait for nothing. They don't have to work for nothing. And when they got to do it, the sky is falling. And they don't know how to cope with that. And so the best way to cope is what's out there on the market. What's the latest and greatest thing that's out there on the market? And I think we got to be really intentional from that. Certainly the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry is not your friend.
To talk about the specific risk factors for Black men in terms of suicidality, which which is having the thoughts of suicide. Um, I want to talk about things such as psychological distress, substance abuse, um, exposure to racial inequality. That one for me, because we're seeing all of these incidents happening over years, with police officers and now with people trying to make a citizen's arrest without a warrant and killing us. That's psychological distress because for some people, reading the media and seeing it played all over and over again, watching the videos being forwarded over and over again on your timeline, that can subject one to a form of PTSD. And then we wonder why some young men don't value their lives is because we live in a country that's almost showing us that's how we should think. So I want to give both of your opinions, starting with Nick. What do you feel about the exposure of the racial inequalities as it relates to our psychological distress during this time?
Mhm. Great question. Great question. I think the racial inequality impacting us psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and just how we see ourselves in society as we continue to work, live, do, play, whatever we do in society, um, is it's not good. It does have an impact on us psychologically. Again, it leads back to anesthetizing,
Hmm.
and finding a way to cope with it and still try to be in society because we're still here every day, and it exists every day and has existed for a while. But this speaks to the very reason we talked about earlier why it is so important that we as individuals, as men in society, African American men in particular, self-care is so real. Self-care is so real. We got to take care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, because life is going to continue to happen. You're going to encounter some things, see some things, feel some things, and even experience some things. Equality and racism and all those things that have happened even before my time still exist.
Mm-hmm.
But what I got to do is, if I'm well mentally and emotionally, I'm taking care of myself, okay? Wholeness, and that includes mindfulness training, meditation, and spiritual understanding and wisdom of just yourself. The better you are able to cope with those type of things when we hear them. Yes, they're certainly unfortunate. It doesn't help any of us out on here any better, but it doesn't allow me to take that situation and internalize it to the point where it impacts me unmanageably to the negative. Okay. Yes, I don't like it. Yes, it's disheartening. It's disturbing, but I gotta stay focused on what's in front of me and what I can do for me and for the people in my space, in my realm. And to your point, you know, then when I hear and see stuff like that, I'm having different kind of conversations with my sons.
Absolutely.
I'm having different conversations with my brothers. I'm having different conversations with my parents, and I'm educating and saying, because this still exists, here's what we've got to do so that we continue to stay safe. And unfortunately, because life is just what it is, and I don't see it getting better. I think it's probably going to be like that until I'm up out of here,
Pretty much.
you know, but I can't allow it to derail me in what I want to pursue in life. I have to be able to continue to push forward, to continue to lean in, continue to forgive, to continue to love, continue to care, and add value to people.
Well, I love how you said the word value. Instantly, when you talked about this subject, it made me think of the Khalif Browder story from New York City. You have a wrongfully accused young teenage black male that gets accused of robbing someone, and it turned out to be the wrong person in the first place. He gets sent to Rikers Islands, was never given a fair, speedy trial. He's in Rikers for petty theft that he never committed, goes through psychological warfare within his own mind, where you're in solitary confinement. As a matter of fact, they literally, after him, they made it so that 16-year-olds were not allowed to go to solitary confinement anymore. This man sat there, had no hope whatsoever. The second he gets out, his own community looks at him as a charity case and thinking that because he shared his story, he has money. 3 months out, he gets stabbed by members of his own community. And because he cannot understand what's going on and how his own community is treating him, he hangs himself. And he's one of the reasons why Rikers Island is going to be shutting down in 2026. And so the reason why I shared that is because of the fact, when I think about, racial inequality in our society, I think about us, our impact on us, how we treat each other. How if I say, hey, I'm not feeling so great today, I want to express my emotions, and you reject me, but you're supposed to be a man that is strong, a leader. You're supposed to help and guide me. But instead, you turn the eye and tell me stop being a sissy, get over it, move on. There are men that are out there like that. I've dealt with that in my own life, where I had to go to my mom to understand and strategize how to navigate through my emotions. But when it came to a male, the most he could do is say, you know what? Hey, this is just life. It'll work itself out. And I feel when that happens, I feel that our community, especially as Black men, we need to understand what it is to value each other. To value each other, so every action towards one another, you're motivating that person to feel as if they are valuable. Because the worst thing you want to do is wake up every single day and feel like you're just walking around as an empty vessel. You have no spirit.
Well,
You just exist.
Well, so you and I talked about this a couple of times, where I said sometimes a person's inability to comfort you looks like they're rejecting you. So when they're so with discomfort, I may project it as you're asking me for way too much, or something is wrong with you. Because remember, if we're saying that Black men need to do this to be more emotional, you are probably running up against a Black man that doesn't know how to do that. And so sometimes I take the lead of saying, as my friend, this is what I need from you. I give you the expectations of what our friendship's going to look like. If I feel that you've let me down before and you were not there for me, I may call and say, "Hey, do you have time to talk?" Because when I came to you about something, I don't, I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel that you heard me, and I've done this on several occasions. And I understand that you may have been uncomfortable, but this is what it made me feel like.
Hmm.
So in this relationship, this is what my friendships look like. And I say that only because you guys know me. I talk, but I was raised by women who were nurturing. So I have more of a nurturing side. So it's easy for me to have the words. So now I do find out that when with our social circles, we're saying black men should be there for each other, but we're asking people 8 times out of 10 who don't know how to be there for themselves to be there for you.
Right.
Hmm.
That's it. That's powerful right
Yeah.
there. Is is we don't know how to self-care. And a lot of times we have expectations they can't give us. And we don't know how to ask for it either.
Right.
We want it. We know it's the void. We know we're missing it. And for a lot of us, yeah, mama's that nurture, and we can go to mama, we can talk about anything, and we can feel like we can even cry with mama because mama is not probably going to be the most non-judgmental person you're going to have to deal with in life.
Hmm.
And even on your worst day, mama's still going to love you.
Absolutely.
Mama's still going to take you in. She may fuss. Mama not about foolishness, but she going to love you unconditionally to the highest possible degree. I'm assuming most people. Okay? But I think because of the socialization as men, especially men of color, we gotta pivot and shift and know that it's open to embrace our young brothers, embrace our peers, embrace our children, and all of those things, and be open to having a discussion about feelings, emotions, and what it looks like to be there for them in their lives at whatever point in their lives they are. What can I be for you right now as a father? What do you need from me spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally? And have those very relevant and real conversations and be willing and open to be vulnerable with them so they see it's okay. When we get mixed messages, and so many mixed messages, that it's not okay, then we clam up, we step away, we back up, we move on.
Well, so there's this thing I use all the time, and one of the joys of coaching and counseling for me, because 98% of my clients are black men. What I enjoy most is when I come into contact with a man who is bottled up, and then one day it may be 7 sessions down the road, and then they start purging because they create their own comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell them in our sessions, you are the top priority. In our sessions, you can say whatever you want to say because I know there's something you have yet to say. But when you're ready, and the joy I have is looking at the person that came in who was bottled up and was trying to play strong because he had to take care of his family or his friends, to Corey, I'm hurting today. Corey, I cried last night. Or Corey, I feel great. I can use the word I feel ecstatic today. You've never used that word before. Or you can say I feel like I have anxiety. Why? Because Corey, you told me what that was.
Hmm.
And what I do with my family and my clients is that I believe in the human method, meaning before we are man, before we are, black, whatever we are, we're human, and that entitles you to have the whole gamut of feelings. It's not a male
Absolutely.
that it's not a male or female um, type of divide with emotions.
Yes.
If something pricks you, does it not hurt? Hell yeah, scream. You know, and
Absolutely.
if you have a heartbreak, you may not cry about it, but
Mhm.
you still hurt. And it's okay to say that. You don't have to macho up in front of me and say, I'm not hurt. And you don't have to, and you don't have to grab the shot glass or grab the weed. You can, if you say you're hurt, that's probably the best thing that you can do. And talk about those feelings. That way you don't need the other substances or the other vices as we talked about. Because the vices are just a way of comforting your discomfort for how you
Temporarily.
feel at that moment.
But do you
And
feel
then
like sometimes it's temporary? Just it's temporary comfort.
And we talked about that to you and I. We said, okay, so if you're a weed head, as you claim, not you, but as someone claims,
Thanks, I appreciate it.
but So
Really?
I have nothing wrong with weed, right? But if you're taking it as soon as you wake up and when you go to bed, I always ask people, what are you running from? What what is your sober mind telling you that you have to run from to use the weed,
Hmm.
or the alcohol
Hmm.
or the sex? Because some people think, and the thing about sex that gets me is that we are conditioned as young men that sex is a badge of honor. As young teens, like your uncles will tell you, or even your dad may tell you, hey, um, but the most sex you have, that proves your manhood. But then it turns into something else when you don't realize that he's having a lot of sex because it's a stress relief. It's not because he likes all the women.
Hmm.
It's because he has no other way of coping with anything else going on in his life. So sex is his vice. And how do you tell somebody? How do you tell a young black man that's been sexualized to believe that sex is a badge of honor, that now sex is your problem? How do you do that?
Right.
So we have to somehow rearrange our messages that we're giving to our kids, and that's why fathers right now and mentors have this opportunity now to break these curses, break these chains, and change the messages slowly. You have a book out called "Who Do You Think You Are? The Power of Believing in Yourself." Tell us what that book is about.
That book is about, I'll give you a little history on the book and then tell you what it's about. The book I drew on and I wrote from a space of a 16-year-old boy who was, and I'm sure, I don't know if any of you all have ever experienced this. As you're growing up, you're being told things like, you're just like your father, you're just like your grandfather, you're just
Oh
like your uncle
yeah.
so and so, stuff like that. And you may not even have a relationship with them or let alone know them. And so when I was writing the book, I was thinking about what I was going through at that time and what I've been journaling. I started journaling when I was about 10 years old. And so I drew upon all of my journals. I journaled till I was about maybe 25 years old. And then I found my voice. So now I don't have to journal as much as I do. I do more gratitude journaling now and growth journaling. But what I did was, it was a, a, a mindset that I said, you know what I found in terms of coming out of depression, coming out of, anxiety and just being low self-image and self-esteem was I wanted to learn who I was. And I felt like the reason I had challenges as a youngster and even in early adulthood was because I didn't understand who I was. And I didn't know who I was, and I didn't love me. And so when I was bullied and teased and taunted, I believed that I was the names people called me. I believed that I wouldn't amount to anything. I believed that I wouldn't live, and I had some health challenges and all those things too. And so all of those negative things were just programmed in me.
Hmm.
And so the book is an inspiration from that. And it's the journey to really finding out who you are. And so the question is, who do you think you are? Is just asking us ourselves the question of who do you think you are, the power of believing in yourself. And so I use the word believe as an acrostic, and each letter in the word believe is a part of who makes up our frame of reference. And as you go through each letter in the book, there's some little assessments and exercises that you do at the end of each chapter that helps you ultimately find out and learn who you are. And then there's a bonus chapter that says, hey, now I know who I am. Life is choices now, because I've been in situations, even myself for many years. My life is the way it is because of this. My dad wasn't there. I had this going on. I had this abuse. I had all of these things, and we define ourselves through that. But once you go through the exercises and you truly recognize who you become aware in some cases of who you really are. Now the choice is yours. And the choice is ours because now I own what life needs to look like for me from here on. And I don't have to blame anybody for anything. Sometimes it may mean I have to forgive. Sometimes I might have to move on. Sometimes I might have to simply grow up. And so the book really takes you down a journey of finding your frame of reference, understanding who you are, and then choosing how you want your life and your trajectory to look like.
And also, before I let anyone go off of this, I have to mention this. So, if you are someone you know that is thinking of suicide, I want you to know that there is a national suicide hotline and 1-800 273 8255. And again, it's the National Suicide Hotline and 1-800 273 8255. And there are people who are trained to guide you to local resources in your area, and the call is confidential. So you don't have to worry about sharing something that will get back to anyone else but those who can help you. So again, if you're contemplating suicide, if you're watching this now, or even if you know someone who is contemplating it, again, the number is 1-800 273 8255.
One of the last things I want to do before we sign off is I want I want you guys to give your final thoughts. Let's say you have someone who's watching this right now who is in the process, in the thoughts of suicide, feeling a little hopeless. What would you say to them right now as words of encouragement? And I want to go from each of you to see what your final words would be for them.
I'll let Nick go.
Thank you. I would say if you're feeling it, talk to someone. If you find that you're feeling it and you're isolated, get amongst family. Don't be by yourself right now. Consider calling if you don't have no person to talk to, consider talking to someone on the hotline. But definitely don't feel like you have to be there alone and go through anything. You know, while this topic today is about suicide thoughts, anytime you're in crisis, we're in a crisis right now with the world pandemic, and that for a lot of people
Mhm.
may seem very detrimental. And these are times when we have to utilize technology, FaceTime, social media, talk to people and use it all on the phone with people. But definitely don't allow yourself to be by yourself and alone. And if you don't have anyone, then consider that hotline, that number that Cory gave you, and folks will be there 24/7 to talk you through the process and kind of get you to a better emotional state and space.
Awesome. Well, I always tell people that if you have people in your circle, they love you enough to want to help you. So I want you to rely on the people that you have already trusted in your life, because those we trust as a friend, I want to know what you need. And so this may be your opportunity to speak your expectations. Let's go to social media for a change. There are people that cry out on social media. Perhaps you have that social media friend who has been there for you, in times of comedy and times of other things. Hey, make a post. I've seen those posts where people have said, hey, I'm on the edge, and someone goes out and they reach out to you. So let's use social media in a way that helps us, because it does connect us in some kind of way to people that we share, those common interests in. Also, always consider the hotline, because as myself and as Nick said, these are trained individuals. These are not people who just woke up and said, I want to help you. They have to go through a rigorous training program to make sure that they keep you first, and their goal is to get you to the next step of relief. And again, it's a national hotline, but then they point you to local resources in your area. So I don't care if you are in Timbuktu or in Alaska, they're going to point you to the nearest and best resource based on what you need. And oh, and also, Nick, I want to know how people can find find out more about the book, and also how to stay connected
Great,
with you.
great. But you can get the book on my website, which is nicholasdillon.com, Nicholas, Dillon, Dillon.com. And you can just find me on all the social medias as Nick Dillon or the Believe Coach. If you just search that, I'm pretty much consistent on all the social medias. One will lead you to the other.
Mhm.
And certainly feel free to reach out and, anytime you need something.
Awesome. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time out of your day during this pandemic to join us with this vital information that's focused on Black men's mental health. And if you guys are watching this, I would love for you guys to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram, and stay tuned for more awesome conversations. And we'll talk to you next week. God bless you.